je crois que tout est prêt pour la visioconférence. Hywel nous attend. Hello Hywel, thank you for being here today. As the founding father of the Erasmus program, so you're going to deliver your speech, and then the audience will ask you questions about what you did. So it is time for you to speak. Thank you.
Chers amis, mesdames et messieurs, Boreda au Cardiff à Gomri. Bonjour de Cardiff et du Pays de Galles en gallois. Je vous remercie beaucoup de votre accueil, votre invitation, et je regrette énormément que je ne peux pas être avec vous à Grenoble aujourd'hui. Je voudrais saisir cette occasion aussi pour remercier et féliciter Muriel Bourdon sur son travail important sur l'histoire du programme Erasmus. Je vous salue de l'université de Cardiff ce matin, où il y a 15 jours, nous avons aussi fêté le 25e anniversaire du programme Erasmus. Et l'université ici s'est engagée dans les 5 années à venir d'augmenter jusqu'à 17% le nombre d'étudiants qui passent une période d'études à l'étranger. Un engagement très important de l'institution à l'internationalisation des études. Vous m'excuserez ce matin, je l'espère, si je vous adresse en anglais. Au moins, c'est dans ma deuxième langue après le gallois. I would like to compliment the university on its initiative to take stock and to look forward to the EU 2020 strategy, in which the Erasmus for All program will be one of the center pieces. When I saw here and in Cardiff that I was described in the programs as the father of Erasmus, I was a little worried by the realization that if this were true, my date of birth would have been 1469. This year, 2013, marks the 40th anniversary of the first enlargement of the EU, or the EEC as it was then called, with Denmark, Ireland and the United Kingdom joining as new members, making a total then, in 1973, of 9 member states. Of course, the membership of the EU is 3 times as great after several further enlargements. The year 1973 was significant too, because it saw the creation of the first Education and Youth Department within the European Commission. This was the direct result of the initiative led by Commissioner Altiero Spinelli in the retiring Commission. Spinelli had the vision to argue for a strong educational dimension as absolutely necessary for the construction of an open and democratic Europe. I was privileged to be appointed as its first head of department, with the challenge of preparing proposals for a European Education Action Programme. The key with the then 9 member states was to demonstrate that educational cooperation at the European level would not imply harmonization or standardization of the different systems, and that the Commission would not work through proposals to develop binding legislation. Its traditional methods in fields like agriculture and the customs union, which required common and binding rules. The choice of Professor Ralph Dahrendorf in 1973 as the Commissioner with responsibility for education, science and research was particularly inspiring. His charismatic presence and internationally recognized academic credibility were important factors in preparing the first breakthrough on education in the negotiations with the Council of Ministers. The original concept underlying the Erasmus program dates back to this first Education Action Program in 1976. Then, the European education ministers agreed for the first time to establish close cooperation between the educational systems of the EEC. They also agreed at that meeting that the European Commission should act as the broker, the facilitator of the action program they set in train, and that an education committee be set up consisting of the Member States and the Commission to oversee the cooperation between the Member States and the Commission. This action program, and forgive me for this technical formulation, but that's what it was. This action program was adopted on the basis of what was called a mixed resolution of the Council and ministers meeting within the Council. This double formulation was negotiated as a special political formula so as to recognize that there was some justification provided by the Treaty of Rome, most evidently in relation to the education of migrant children and migrant workers, whereas other educational actions fell exclusively under the competence of Member States. A mixture, in fact, of intergovernmental and communautaire competence. As one of the priority actions, ministers decided to promote joint courses of study between universities and higher education institutions. In fact, the first formulation of the pre-Erasmus core idea. I had proposed the idea of joint study programs as a result of the experience I had witnessed personally when working at the University of Sussex, the first of the 7 new universities in the United Kingdom in the 1960s, where its School of European Studies broke new ground by providing an organized opportunity for all its students, whatever their major discipline, and not only reserved for linguists, to pursue a year abroad as part of their degree program. I was convinced that such an idea could be developed on the European stage. The overall European context at that time was not very helpful. 0.5% only of students throughout Europe were mobile. If you extracted the numbers involved between France, Germany, and the United Kingdom of foreign language assistantships initiated back in 1904 between the United Kingdom and France, the percentage would have been very, very tiny indeed. The other European countries, surprisingly, had virtually no experience of student exchanges and mobility. Who could possibly have imagined, for example, with a little later, that Spain, to take just one example, which had little prior experience, would by 2011 have sent more than 36,000 Spanish students, Erasmus students, to other European countries, and would have received over 37,000 students into Spain. The decision to launch this first Education Action Program represented an important breakthrough, as the subject of education had previously been taboo on the European political agenda. The word education did not feature in the original founding Treaty of Rome. This lack of a political, let alone legal basis for action in the field of education was, in my view, undoubtedly influenced mainly by de Gaulle's personal conception of Europe. And, I have to say it, the uneasiness of the French authorities, in particular among the original 6 member states, to countenance interference with areas like education, which they feared could lead to the invasion of the sovereignty of national systems. In the 10 years between 1976 and 1986, the European Commission then collaborated closely with the national education authorities, and most especially with universities, to promote cross-border links and to start up partnerships by actively engaging with academic staff and students. The European Committee of Presidents and Rectors, networks of entrepreneurial deans, and students generally responded enthusiastically, providing a strong basis of encouragement and support to build the Commission's presentation of the much more ambitious Erasmus scheme itself. This 10-year development phase had clearly demonstrated that the scheme could work in practice, despite the diversity of systems and the diversity of approaches. The pioneering experimentation which we initiated during this period with credit transfer and modular units of study, the ECTS, proved to be full of promise for larger scale development. The European Parliament, then and ever since, right up to today, has consistently backed the programme, seeing it more and more as a necessary and permanent feature of the European Union, in view of its wide appeal and success as a positive symbol of the European Union, critically important in these difficult days for Europe. It was perhaps natural that universities and other higher education institutions would take the lead in forging strong European bonds, since they and leading academics had always taken great pride in their international roles and responsibilities. Building stronger cross-national connections within Europe, in both teaching and research, emerged as a natural extension of their previous international links. At a time of diminishing national budgets for higher education in the 1980s, the European Community, as it was then called, was seen as a new source of innovation and intellectual inspiration, and also a new source of financial support. With the explosion of enthusiastic support and very effective lobbying of prime ministers and presidents, including the reluctant Mrs. Thatcher at the London European Summit, the programme was officially launched in 1987. The outstanding leadership qualities of Jacques Delors as President of the European Commission undoubtedly played an important role in the London Summit. The programme made a huge quantum leap at this point in the size of the budget and in the numbers of students involved. The title Erasmus, with its historic symbolism and immediate appeal, also worked perfectly as an acronym: European Community Action Scheme for the Mobility of University Students. As had been advocated during the initial experimental period, the driving idea was that scholars, teachers and students should be able to move around European universities as easily as in medieval times, when scholars like Erasmus could move from university to university without difficulty. The aim was to encourage a new form of professionalism, gained through experience of working and studying in another European country, and of course, involving the acquisition of at least one foreign language. The kind of professionalism which would know best how to exploit the opportunities which were opening up in Europe as a result of the European Union's political decision, again the initiative of President Delors, to establish the single market the biggest single market in the world, and the rapid expansion of intra-European Union trade and European mergers that followed in its train. The kind of professionalism that will prepare future leaders in all walks of life with an international and especially European experience and perspective. The 1992 political target set at that time by the European Union heads of state for the completion of the internal market also gave considerable momentum to the Erasmus and COMET, that was the university industry companion program, initiatives as well as attracting a great amount of public publicity and popular appeal for them. The four freedoms, freedom of goods, services, capital and labour, were at the heart of the internal market agenda. There followed many signals that young people wish to make their careers and plan their education and training in a European context. This coincided with a growing Europe-wide concern to invest in people, in their skills, their creativity, their versatility, and also political support following the Fontainebleau summit in 1984 for proposals to develop a greater sense of European citizenship. Education and training moved up the European political agenda. The growing mutual confidence between the different educational authorities, coupled with and indeed fueled by the dynamic of the Erasmus and COMET programs, certainly contributed to the successful negotiations which led to the introduction of a new chapter on education and vocational training policy in the Maastricht Treaty in 1993. This new element in the treaty provided a clear legal basis for the future and represented the natural culmination of everything that we tried to build up in the period from 1976. The wording of the two articles in the treaty made it totally clear that any idea of harmonization of the education and training systems was simply not acceptable. The explicit formulation of the primary responsibility of the member states on education policy and the complementary role of the European Union was a perfect example of subsidiarity being written into the treaty. During this period too, the Gravier judgment in 1985, issued by the European Court of Justice, certainly had a profound influence on the legal debates. This legal case had been brought by a student who was a French national who wished to pursue a course in cartoon design at a Belgian art school. She took the Belgian authority, the city of Liège, to court on the grounds that as an EC national, she should have been given a place on the same terms as Belgian students and should not be charged the higher foreign student fee called the Minerval. The European Court had in fact accepted that there should be no discrimination between EC nationals in terms of access to training, and that the word training should be deemed to cover university education. The negotiations which led ultimately to the adoption of the Erasmus and COMET programs owed a great deal to the determination and dynamic leadership of Peter Sutherland, the Irish Commissioner, who was followed by the Spanish Commissioner Manuel Marin, who was also passionately attached to winning what had been a very difficult battle in the negotiations, notably with the three largest member states because of the legal questions involved. Whilst the organized mobility of students within Europe was and continues to be the idea that has caught the wider popular imagination, the keys to its long-term success lie in the basic architecture of the program. From the very outset, the program was conceived to release initiatives from the grassroots level on an entirely voluntary, decentralized basis, and not via the national authorities. The power of initiative was placed firmly in the hands of universities themselves to seek and develop partnerships abroad. Universities, with their own degree awarding powers in most European countries, were to be the initiators and drivers of the process because it was essential to have the assurance of their institutional commitment to and responsibility for the quality of the arrangements for cooperation. This institutional engagement on the part of the university authority was seen as a sine qua non for a lasting, long-term effort which would embed the capacity to mount joint degrees or joint ventures. Our ambition was to see more and more degrees awarded jointly by two or more universities across national boundaries. We were confident that this could generate a snowball effect through the emergence of a multitude of interinstitutional agreements through which the universities themselves resolve the problems of mutual recognition of academic qualifications. We deliberately created the NAVIC network of academic recognition centres, as a flanking initiative to provide authoritative information on the different qualification systems in the member states. This approach was the opposite of that attempted unsuccessfully over the years by the Council of Europe, which had sought to rely on a top-down approach on recognition questions through the adoption of a European convention signed and organized by the national authorities. To participate in Erasmus, university authorities were in particular expected to give the assurance that the period of study spent abroad would be fully recognized as a necessary and integral part of the student's final qualification, and that it would be explicitly presented as such in the final degree qualification so that prospective employers would be able to see for themselves the plus value of such European experience when they examine the student's curriculum vitae. This precondition is now a key component of the Erasmus Charter, which participating universities have to sign when they commit to participation in the program. All evidence that I have seen suggests that employers throughout Europe have consistently recognized the plus value of this extra European dimension in their recruitment policies. The decentralized approach adopted by the Commission rapidly led many universities to set up their own Erasmus or European offices to assist in institutionalizing their partnership agreements and committing themselves institutionally more than ever before to a process of internationalization of their teaching programs. This commitment provided important support to the vital decision, which we also negotiated, that Erasmus should be underpinned by reciprocal cross-national arrangements regarding the financing of such exchanges, including the waiving of tuition fees, and the provision of Commission top-up complementary grants to participating students towards their travel and subsistence, which would complement the different national systems, very different national systems of student financing and support. The other decision that has continued to make all the difference in the development of Erasmus was to make grants to academic and administrative staffs to help them to reconnoitre possible partners abroad and to plan with their partners and prepare the necessary quality conditions governing the teaching and assessment of the joint courses. Over the years, this has helped build up mutual trust and professional friendships. It has enhanced mutual understanding of the different systems and structures of curricula and degrees, as well as generating widespread confidence in the collaborative schemes. By 2011, over 300,000 grants had been given for both teaching and staff training assignments, so crucial to changing the European educational landscape. The decision to open up Erasmus to students of all disciplines was, to my mind, perhaps the most exciting innovation. Present and future labour market opportunities require graduates in all fields, not only in law, economics and business studies, with the capacity to work across the cultures through the medium of at least 2 and preferably 3 languages. Whereas in the early days, combinations of business studies with foreign languages proved to be the most popular, law, engineering, manufacturing, construction all experienced strong take-up, together with the humanities, social sciences and the arts. The appeal and experience of the companion COMET scheme, the University Industry Collaboration Scheme, launched at the same time as Erasmus, has by now been progressively integrated into Erasmus, offering students opportunities to enjoy placements in industry, business, or in other organizations as part of their experience abroad, and also recognized as part of their degree programs. This aspect particularly has continued to generate lots of support from industrialists, from employers and trade unions, who have given their enthusiastic backing to the scheme, most especially to the idea of what we call in English sandwich placements within the European program. Apart from the value of the studies, of course, and the elimination of stereotype thinking of other cultures, it has been the broadening of the personal and intellectual horizons of students that makes all the difference. It is also, as many students tell me, the building of enduring European friendships and the long-lasting interest and commitment both to the place and to the university in which students have studied that matter too, let alone what I understand to be the considerable and growing number of marriages that have resulted from the Erasmus experience. The basic architecture of Erasmus has remained essentially the same over the whole period, though its overall budget has grown massively over the years. Despite the quarrels which you will have seen over the European Union budget earlier this year, it now seems likely in the next months that as part of the final budget settlement, Erasmus for All will receive an allocation of 31 billion euros for the next 7-year period, of which it is hoped that 45% will go to the Erasmus program itself, the university part of the program, though there are huge pressures especially, and naturally I believe, from the European Parliament, to commit more financial resources to vocational education and training because of the severe youth unemployment crisis we're experiencing throughout Europe. Today we celebrate the achievements of your university over the last 25 years and applaud your ambitions for the future. We can at the same time celebrate the fact that more than 3 million students now will this year have participated in the Erasmus program, with the engagement of thousands of universities and other institutions of higher education. The European Union programs of the 1980s had placed inter-university cooperation in Europe on a much, much larger scale than any previous international educational venture. This pattern of cooperation was given further impetus by three successive waves of development. The first wave involved the opening up of Erasmus to the EFTA countries. The second involved the countries of Central and Eastern Europe, especially following the fall of the Berlin Wall, and the creation, the deliberate creation of the very popular Tempus scheme for higher education reform in the countries of Central and Eastern Europe. And the third wave opened up cooperation with the rest of the world, building on early experimentation which we had developed bilaterally with the United States of America. The success of these initiatives and the growing willingness of other governments to see cooperation with the Erasmus dynamic as a valuable investment in their diplomatic strategies gave the Commission the confidence to launch Erasmus Mundus. The program now has a global outreach, connecting universities across the globe. There is a real opportunity for universities to partner with institutions in other regions of the world, and to engage, for example, in mounting quality joint degrees at master's level. An Erasmus Mundus joint program requires at least 3 partner institutions in 3 countries to construct a multinational interdisciplinary program which is delivered through mobility across 3 sites. The qualification can be joint, double, or multiple, demonstrating the great flexibility of Erasmus Mundus, which has now become a recognizable European brand worldwide. Looking back over the past 25 years, we can now see that the Erasmus program and its European Credit Transfer Scheme, the ECTS, have been instrumental in helping to transform the European Union higher education scene. The Bologna process, to which they paved the way, has had a huge impact on the design and structure of degrees in Europe. These have progressively led also to the creation of what is called a European higher education area, which in turn is serving as an increasingly important framework which promotes deeper internationalization and therefore the modernization of teaching and research programs. Erasmus for All is now confirmed as one of the 3 centerpieces of the European Union 2020 strategy, together with Horizon 2020 research and innovation, and the European Union's continuing strategic commitment to cohesion and structural policies. In addition to developing throughout the European Union knowledge and innovation communities, Horizon 2020 will also provide the Marie Curie Awards, which are designed to underpin excellent doctoral training for 25,000 doctoral students in this next phase. The European Union cohesion and structural policies and funds have already been of considerable benefit to many regions throughout the European Union, most especially those less developed regions where they have been used extensively. For in Ireland is a very notable example to transform the quality of the higher and further education sector. Together, these 3 centerpieces are seen by the EU governments as very, very important if the EU is to succeed in helping member states to build a much stronger capacity for growth and competitiveness on the global stage, and at the same time combat social exclusion and unemployment. These three European Union flagship initiatives are being developed in close synergy with each other, and they offer a considerable opportunity over the period 2014 to 2020 for the university and higher education sector to engage as powerful brokers of collaboration with the private and public sectors. The new generation of EU programs, with their new financing, will, I hope, be launched early next year once the European Union budget is finally settled, we hope, in the coming months. I very much hope that your university will take the opportunity to be a leading actor, building up its capacity to exploit the potential of all three programs as part of your own development plan to 2020. In this way, the university and other universities can further demonstrate the commitment to the mission of public engagement, whilst also enhancing the quality of teaching and research through the internationalization of studies. The nations of Europe, with all their political and cultural diversity, have long recognized that their future is dependent on the skills, the ingenuity, inventiveness, and creativity of people. Industrialization and the growth of education went hand in hand. Yet, we all now share very serious doubts about our competitive edge to handle the increasing impact of globalization. Universities are called upon to make a very special, a very distinctive contribution, especially in these harsh economic times, acting as powerful drivers of innovation, so as to help build a stronger basis for more quality jobs by building greater competitiveness and growth. Throughout Europe, we know the stakes are very high and the challenges very demanding. I would like to wish the university every success with its development plans for the coming years, and the Erasmus students who are studying with you every success too with their studies and their careers. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Thank you for this long and detailed story of the Europe of education. We are going to ask you questions, but first I have met a student this morning, Erasmus students from Brazil. Would you like to say anything to Hywel? Just introduce yourself. Juste dire qui vous êtes et ce qui est. Oui, demandez-vous.
Bon, bonjour, donc je m'appelle Eduardo Rocha, donc je suis étudiant brésilien. Ok. Donc ça fait depuis 7 ans que je suis à Grenoble maintenant, donc, et depuis j'ai toujours été on va dire mêlé dans le milieu Erasmus, donc voilà, c'est une très riche expérience, donc je peux dire comme ça. Donc je voulais vous remercier pour vos paroles, donc je laisse la parole peut-être à quelqu'un d'autre, donc merci beaucoup.
Je vous prends un peu par surprise, mais bon, j'ai pas cette file. Est-ce que je peux avoir un autre micro ou... Monsieur Chosu, c'est ça. J'ai eu le témoignage d'un monsieur qui a participé à l'aventure d'Erasmus depuis 1987. Donc juste un petit témoignage.
J'ai participé à Erasmus non pas depuis 1987, mais depuis 1988. Et 88-89, j'ai été chargé à ce moment de mettre en place les échanges avec les universités italiennes. Et L'anecdote serait que je ne sais combien de mariages Erasmus j'ai pu provoquer en créant ces partenariats avec l'Italie. Mais j'ai un peu de nostalgie aussi de l'Erasmus initial. La nostalgie des programmes interuniversitaires de coopération, ICP ou PIC, qui rassemblaient dans un même réseau 10, 15, 20 universités, ce qui donnait l'opportunité de rassembler tous ces gens chaque année au même endroit. Et une chose qu'on fait difficilement aujourd'hui dans les programmes bilatéraux. Et j'ai le souvenir, de façon très très symbolique, que l'un des réseaux qu'on dirigeait dans mon université de Lyon incluait l'université de Jena. Et on s'est empressé de faire une réunion PIC à Jena dès après la chute du mur, après 89. De façon symbolique, on avait tenu à faire ça. Et j'ai un peu cette nostalgie. Et puis, je vous le dis à vous, j'ai envie de le dire aux Français surtout, en France, on débat beaucoup aujourd'hui de la langue de l'enseignement dans les universités. Et Erasmus prévoit une mobilité. Un étudiant part 3 mois, il part 10 mois, il a éteint son crédit Erasmus. Aujourd'hui, bien que vous soyez un peu anglophone, la France semble faire le choix du bilinguisme. La loi française semble vouloir entériner un choix qui a peut-être déjà été fait partiellement par les universitaires, peut-être par les politiques. Je me demande si aujourd'hui ce choix il est fait, ou en tout cas il faut peut-être le réorienter. Je crois que le choix, ce n'est pas celui du bilinguisme, mais le véritable choix devrait être celui du multilinguisme, du plurilinguisme. Et je pense qu'Erasmus pourrait contribuer à ce plurilinguisme en nous donnant non pas droit à une mobilité, mais droit à un crédit de mois, que l'étudiant pourrait dépenser, non pas dans un seul pays, mais peut-être au moins dans 2. L'Europe nous a donné un cadre extraordinaire pour cette mobilité, et je crois que, d'une part, ça allégerait peut-être la pression sur les universités britanniques et anglo-saxonnes globalement, mais je crois que l'une des cartes importantes qui me paraît devoir être jouée aujourd'hui, c'est celle du plurilinguisme, parce que le plurilinguisme, c'est aussi la diversité culturelle. Donc, c'est plus qu'un témoignage que je vous envoie, c'est aussi une interrogation, un souhait, un vœu. Voilà, je vous remercie.
Do you wish to answer or to react to what Mr. said, Mr. Josie?
Alors, merci beaucoup de ces témoignages. Je suis totalement d'accord sur le principe qu'il faut encourager le plurilinguisme, mettre l'accent exclusivement sur le bilinguisme n'est pas très souple dans ce monde d'aujourd'hui. Je crois qu'il y a beaucoup d'étudiants Erasmus qui passent 2 périodes à l'étranger. Je connais plusieurs qui ont passé dans le programme Erasmus une période en Espagne et ensuite en Italie. Ça dépend de la durée de la période où ils ont la possibilité de faire un Erasmus. Je crois aussi que je constate qu'il y a une diminution ici, dans ce pays, le Royaume-Uni, d'engagement et surtout de faire le lien entre l'enseignement des langues et les disciplines diverses. C'est très décourageant. Le programme Erasmus, c'est un peu à part de ces développements politiques, heureusement, mais j'aimerais voir beaucoup plus d'impact et d'interaction entre l'effet du programme Erasmus et la politique éducative en général. Vous avez mentionné les universités anglo-saxonnes. Venez au Pays de Galles, dans les universités celtiques. Je crois que vous trouverez en Écosse et au Pays de Galles un peu plus d'ouverture. Je ne sais pas ce qu'Anne Corbett va dire sur ce point tout à l'heure. Mais j'ai pas de nostalgie. Je suis heureux de voir que politiquement, il y a une telle puissance, telle volonté de garder le programme au niveau politique. Et comme j'ai dit dans mon petit discours, c'est grâce surtout à l'engagement du Parlement européen. Sans le Parlement européen, on n'aurait pas eu le petit fonds au début, en 1976, et on n'aurait pas eu maintenant ce qu'on a dans le budget pour la période 2014 jusqu'à 2020.
Voilà, on va peut-être finir par un dernier témoignage de donc Dominique Chalensonnet que j'ai rencontré ce matin et qui va vous parler de son projet.
Alors bonjour et merci beaucoup pour votre discours. Je suis très heureuse d'être là aujourd'hui. Alors moi je travaille pour la DARIC de Grenoble, mais je suis aussi professeure dans un collège et à ce titre j'ai monté un projet donc, multilatéral Comenius. Nous avons effectué des mobilités internationales. Nous sommes partis en fait avec des collégiens qui ont 12 ans et 13 ans, donc qui sont en classe de 5e. Donc ce sera peut-être des futurs Comenius, des futurs Erasmus. En fait, on est parti en mobilité internationale en Allemagne, en Pologne et en Turquie au mois de mai. Et moi, je dois dire que de créer cet enthousiasme dès un plus jeune âge, en fait, c'est vraiment quelque chose d'important de susciter l'enthousiasme très jeune. Et j'ai vu que j'ai pu me rendre compte que les enfants sont très demandeurs et sont capables de créer des choses merveilleuses entre eux. Et on peut parler du plurilinguisme parce que en fait, bon, c'est vrai qu'ils échangent comme ils peuvent en anglais avec leurs niveaux et leurs outils de cet âge-là, mais à l'intérieur du partenariat se créent en fait des sous-groupes et on voit que il y a des affinités entre par exemple les Français et les Italiens ou les Français et les Allemands, on parle en français ou on parle dans d'autres langues. Moi je suis professeure d'anglais, mais je prône vraiment la diversité linguistique et culturelle. Et c'est vraiment très important de commencer plus tôt en fait, parce qu'après ils pourront partir en mobilité plus longue. D'ailleurs on a reçu dans notre collège des élèves qui sont partis, des lycéens qui sont partis en mobilité longue de 3 mois, donc ils sont partis en Espagne. Et on a reçu aussi des Espagnols qui sont restés 3 mois à Chambéry, dans le secteur, dans la région. Donc en fait, ces jeunes collégiens, donc eux, ça leur donne vraiment envie de partir plus tard et de partir longtemps. Donc déjà susciter très jeune l'intérêt pour les langues et l'intérêt pour les autres, et surtout la tolérance. La tolérance de vivre ensemble. Donc je pense que ça c'est un espoir d'avenir, et c'est vrai que les projets Comenius dans les établissements c'est moins connu, mais c'est tout aussi important. Voilà.
Merci. Merci. Vas-y. Donc Hywel, on a vu que vous parliez très bien français. On a été content d'échanger avec vous. Il y a Anne Corbett qui va nous faire une présentation maintenant. Si vous voulez la suivre, vous pouvez. Et puis merci pour ce que vous faites. Et voilà, merci d'être là avec nous.
Merci à vous.
Au revoir.
Mais je vais continuer à suivre.
D'accord, entendu.
Continuer à suivre.
Merci.